Nestled just outside Paris, the Palace of Versailles stands as a timeless emblem of royal extravagance, architectural brilliance, and the absolute power of the French monarchy. Once the center of political power and opulence in Europe, Versailles was not merely a royal residence, it was a stage upon which the drama of pre-revolutionary France unfolded. With gilded halls, endless gardens, and storied history, this magnificent estate is both a marvel of Baroque art and a living monument to a bygone era. In this documentary, we journey through time, exploring the palace's origins, its transformation under Louis XIV, life within its glittering walls, the fall of the monarchy, and Versailles' enduring legacy as a symbol of beauty, power, and excess. Versailles began not as a palace, but as a modest hunting lodge. In 1623, King Louis XIII constructed a small brick and stone structure in the village of Versailles, then surrounded by dense forests and marshlands. Intended as a retreat from the court in Paris, this early lodge marked the seed from which one of the world's greatest palaces would grow. As the lodge gained importance, Louis XIII expanded it into a small chateau in the 1630s, setting the groundwork for future development. However, it was his son, Louis XIV, the Sun King, who would envision something far grander, an expression of absolute monarchy in architectural form. In 1661, the Sun King embarked on a mission to turn Versailles into a symbol of his reign. Following the death of his chief minister, Cardinal Mazarin, Louis XIV resolved to govern without intermediaries. He chose Versailles as the epicenter of his authority. Far from the intrigue and unrest of Paris, the transformation began under the direction of architect Louis Lavaux, landscape designer André Lenotre, and artist Charles Le Brun. Over decades, they expanded the modest chateau into a sprawling palace complex, encapsulating the ideals of French classicism. Versailles architecture emphasized symmetry, grandeur, and order. Lenotre's gardens, extending over 800 hectares, became just as important as the palace itself, an extension of royal power manifest in nature. With their geometric patterns, water features, and meticulously trimmed hedges, the gardens symbolized human control over the wild. The Hall of Mirrors, perhaps Versailles' most iconic room, was completed in the 1680s. With 357 mirrors lining its 73-meter length, it dazzled visitors with its reflection of sunlight and candlelight. Here, power was not only wielded but performed. Court gatherings, diplomatic receptions, and royal ceremonies were all staged within this luminous gallery. Versailles was not only a royal residence, it was the nerve center of government and society. Louis XIV moved the entire court and government to Versailles in 1682. Nobles were required to reside at the palace periodically, keeping them under the king's watchful eye. This centralization reinforced Louis' absolute authority. Court life at Versailles was governed by strict etiquette. Everything, from how one bowed to where one stood, was a reflection of status and favor. Nobles competed not for land or armies, but for proximity to the king. The rising of the king, lever, and his going to bed, coucher, were elaborate ceremonies attended by selected courtiers. Luxury and spectacle permeated daily life. The palace hosted balls, theatrical performances, musical concerts, and elaborate hunts. Yet behind the glamour was a system of surveillance and control. Versailles also served as a cultural beacon. It was the birthplace of French classical music, theatre, and decorative arts. Composers like Lully and dramatists like Molière found royal patronage here. The arts were deployed to glorify the monarch and project France's cultural supremacy. The Palace of Versailles comprises over 2,300 rooms, with the King's and Queen's apartments among the most lavish. The King's apartment was a suite of rooms designed for ceremonial use, adorned with mythological themes that glorified the monarch. The Queen's apartment, redesigned for Marie Antoinette in the 18th century, offered privacy and elegance, showcasing fine furniture, tapestries, and porcelain. The Royal Chapel, completed in 1710, epitomized Baroque splendor with its grand columns, painted ceiling by Antoine Coypel, and gilded altar. Daily Mass was held here, attended by the royal family and court. Adjacent to the main palace, the Grand Trianon and Petit Trianon offered royal escape from court protocol. Built for Louis XIV and later used by Marie Antoinette, these retreats provided relative privacy and freedom from rigid ceremonial life. Beyond the gardens lay the Hameau de la Reine, a pastoral village built for Marie Antoinette. Designed to resemble a peasant hamlet, it allowed the queen and her companions to indulge in idealized rural life, far removed from the realities of commoners. Despite its grandeur, Versailles became a symbol of the monarchy's detachment from the French people. As France entered financial crises in the late 18th century, the opulence of Versailles stood in stark contrast to the poverty and suffering of the populace. Louis XVI, who inherited the throne in 1774, faced mounting unrest. His Austrian-born queen, Marie Antoinette, became a lightning rod for criticism. Her lavish lifestyle and supposed indifference to the poor fueled revolutionary anger. On October 5, 1789, a pivotal moment occurred. Thousands of women marched from Paris to Versailles, demanding bread and accountability. They stormed the palace, forcing the royal family to return to Paris. It was the symbolic end of Versailles as a seat of power. Shortly after, the palace was largely abandoned. Furniture was sold, and precious artworks were relocated or looted. Versailles, once the center of the world's most influential monarchy, became a relic. Following the revolution, Versailles fell into neglect. But in the 19th century, interest in preserving France's royal heritage surged. In 1837, King Louis Philippe transformed the palace into the Museum of the History of France, commemorating the nation's military and political past. Restoration efforts continued throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. Despite damage during the French Revolution and World Wars, Versailles was gradually returned to its former glory. International support and national pride drove efforts to maintain the palace and gardens. In 1919, the Hall of Mirrors again entered global history when the Treaty of Versailles was signed here, officially ending World War I. The choice of venue was deeply symbolic, linking the rise of European imperialism to its tragic consequences. Today, the Palace of Versailles is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the most visited monuments in the world. More than 7 million people visit each year, drawn by its architecture, art, and history. Versailles remains a symbol of French national identity, cultural refinement, and the complexities of power. It has inspired palaces worldwide, from Schönbrunn in Austria to Peterhof in Russia. Its gardens continue to astound with grand fountains, sculptures, and seasonal displays. Musical fountain shows, light festivals, and classical concerts preserve its cultural legacy. Beyond its beauty, Versailles challenges us to reflect on the relationship between authority and responsibility, wealth and justice, spectacle and reality. The palace teaches us that even the most dazzling structures can fall, and that their stories endure. The Palace of Versailles is not merely a historical site. It is a mirror of humanity's greatest ambitions and gravest mistakes. From the glory of Louis XIV to the cries of revolution, its halls echo with the rise and fall of kings, the triumph of art, and the enduring spirit of a nation. As golden sunlight washes over its marbled corridors and endless gardens, Versailles reminds us of our shared history, and the timeless pursuit of beauty, meaning, and power.